have Mike, VA3MW from Flex Radio, tell us about Flex Radio. Go ahead, Mike. Oh, unmute, sir.
Something never said on this call or any call I've ever been on. Good evening. Somebody muted me. We'll try that again for the third time. Good evening. And if you could make me a co-host if you haven't done so already.
Should be able to share a screen.
All right. I am not able to share my screen.
Yes.
Then I'll start my presentation. While we're waiting for that, so I am Mike, VA3MW. I live in Toronto, been a ham operator for about a long time, pushing half a century, 48 years. And the last 5 or 6, I've enjoyed sort of some quiet retirement type work, working for Flex Radio out of Austin, Texas. Flex Radio makes a incredibly wonderful HF radio, which is what we're going to talk about. So
all right, you should be able to share your screen now, Mike.
Yep, working on it now. And so we'll just have to get rid of a bunch of stuff because I only have one screen today. And we'll put this in presenter view. Well, that's going to be entertaining. Okay, I'll have to work from this. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Excellent. And so I'm going to tell you about some technology and how it's changed. I'm actually going to, let me shrink this and see how this works. And do I need to admit that person or will somebody else get him?
No, I'll get him.
Okay. So when we started HF radio a little while ago, maybe in the 40s and 50s, this was maybe what an HF station may have looked like at that time. And then we might have, because we tend to do as ham operators, we might have gotten carried away, and then all of a sudden it looked like this. And that's if you just stayed in the Collins world. I'm going to skip about 40 years, and we're now to the point where your HF station looks like this. And you'll notice the radios aren't there. We can actually, it's probably incredibly XYL friendly. We have an operator station here with, let's see, he's got his mic there. He's got a VFO knob. He's probably got some headphones, a CW key, and he's able to get on the air from that. And so we've gotten from operating out of the back corner of the basement, or in my case, when I first started, was in a crawl space. It was 3.5 feet high, but I was happy to have it because no adult ever wanted to walk in there. We now are to the point where things look a lot better. If you've used any HF radio in a mouse, you can operate Smart SDR, which is part of what we use to control a Flex radio. There are, if you've ever used any sort of remote radio or anything, you've probably seen a screen incredibly similar to this. And this is one of the control screens. I'm going to talk about client screens that are available for working with a radio that's going to be in a little bit different setup than you're used to. And I'll explain further. But if you look closely around the screen, if you look closely around the screen, you can see the knobs are pretty much the same. You know, if you want to go to upper sideband, lower sideband, turn on a noise blanker, the information's all there. We just click on the screen. Instead of putting on your glasses, getting on a light, looking at something like an FDDX 5000 with 117 knobs on it and 3 levels of shift, we think it's a little easier this way. But if you're a knob person, we still have a control panel for you. This is called a Maestro. This allows you to connect to your radio over the Ethernet or the LAN in your house. And now you can take your radio, which is a black box, you can put it under the desk, you can put it on top of the desk, you can put it, well, here in Canada, you just say put it in the furnace room. But since you guys don't have furnaces, you can put it in some other room. You can move it to the base of the tower if you had a little shed there. And I'll tell you what, base of the tower is not a bad idea because you get rid of a lot of lossy RF cable and you need less of it. And ultimately you get more signal on the air and you hear better. But if you want a real radio, we can do that too. And this is a complete HF radio that has 100 watts on all bands 163 to 6, but it will also even transmit on 2200 meters and 630 meters, albeit a little low power, but you can make it work. So when we started HF radio, or we started radio 100 years ago, just after Marconi, a couple of really smart guys came up with something called super heterodyne technology. And the super heterodyne technology allowed us to create a radio that could be tuned with a VFO. And ultimately, you're mixing two signals at the same time. And you get, when you mix two radio signals at the same time, if you remember when you took your license, you probably went through this, or you went through your classes, you had the sum and the difference, the original, and you wanted one of those and you had to get rid of all the others. That worked really well, but mixing, we call that mixing, is not, it's incredibly good, but we can do better. And the problem with mixing is mixing creates noise. And we get, the mixers are non-linear, and they smear noise across the band. And this is what we call the reciprocal mixing. If you've ever looked at any stats in ARRL or any other site that may be doing something with measuring performance specs. And they also cause incredibly strange automatic gain control effects. Maybe you've heard a point in time when you've had your noise blanker on and somebody just up the band was incredibly strong and it caused the signal you're receiving to pump. We call that AGC pumping. And just a little bit, when we look at bench numbers, for those of you that look at performance numbers, the RMDR numbers that we see are great. They're tested on a super heterodyne radio on the bench, but super heterodynes only really give you great performance numbers when there's only one signal present, or two. Once you get to 3, 4, 5, 1,000, they start to actually fall apart. They don't perform as good, but it's incredibly hard to do a performance test like that when you can't really do real world testing, but control it well enough to come up with a very good performance number. The radios we have today that we're seeing in the Flex radios, or the new ICOM radio like the 7610, or the Elecraft radio like the K4, we've gotten rid of super heterodynes and mixing, and we use something called direct sampling, which means we take the RF signal from the antenna and we immediately do something with it without a mixer, and we convert that to numbers. And that's really important to us because with those numbers that we can convert the RF energy into something we want to hear out of our ears. By the way, the super heterodyne technology I'm talking about is over a century old. Is there anything we know about in today's electronics world that still is build new items that are over 100 years old? Heck, we've even replaced the light bulb as an example. I'm just going to grab a drink of water. So don't let the software-defined radio term scare you. It's actually just a technology change. If we go back through the life cycle of radios, we started with spark gap. Did you know Marconi was actually QRM'd by another spark gap station, relaying results one day, by the way, from the America's Cup? It's quite an interesting read. So we started with spark gap. We then moved into tubes, and we had chokes and coils, and then we started to get into semiconductors, and we started to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Software defined is just the next step in the technology of converting RF energy into something we want to handle, whether it's FT8 signals or what we hear in our ears type of thing. Now, I can't see what's going on in the room, but I want someone to put up their hand if they own if they don't own an SDR radios. Somebody tell me the number. And I wish I could see you guys, because this is a test. This is a trick question.
There's 5 people.
Don't own an SDR radio.
Do not own an SDR.
Okay, for those 5 people, do you own a cell phone?
I think they all do.
Guess what?
Guess what? You own an SDR radio. And the beauty of when we get into this technology where we use software defined is we can then, at least in our world, make it easy for people to do things with the radio. And Steve Hicks, N5AC, does a great talk regarding about this when he first bought his HF mobile radio or his VHF radio. I think it was like a Kenwood 732 or 742. And he wanted to program it. He wanted to do stuff with, but it was all closed architecture. You couldn't do it. But you can do that in Flex software defined architecture. You can, it's plug and play out of the box. So don't let me scare you. But if you want to tinker, you can still tinker away because we have the ability to, you have the ability to communicate with the radio to get all sorts of information. Maybe it's just VFO frequency. Maybe it's the settings of your bandwidth. And all those software terms are open. And if you received QST back in September of last year, Dave WO2X and I did an article regarding Node-RED, which is a really cool utility for ham operators. It's a programming language, but I'll tell you, you don't need to be a programmer to program. So usually I pick up a RTL dongle, but it's at my home desk. But so what's the difference? Well, there's a whole lot of performance difference. Now, a dongle is a great thing to play with. And I think if you guys run any courses, I think you should, this is the type of thing that should be given to a new, I say kid, but that's probably anybody under 50, any new person that's joining ham radio to play with, because it's such a great teaching tool. But they're probably the akin to what the Crystal radio used to be. They work really well, but they're not as selective. They suffer from a whole part of artifact issues. Of course, they don't have a 100-watt transmitter built in. They sample at 8 bits, which is enough to hear what it's saying. That's 8 data bits. Flex radio samples the radio spectrum from 30 kilohertz to 54 megahertz, all at the same time at 16 bits. That turns into a whack of data. And if you were to measure it on the network in the radio, and there is such a network, it's 3 gigabytes of data. Doesn't sound like a big number? Well, that's 3,100 megabit home networks. And they get fed into something called a field programmable gate array. It's just a big, powerful computer. And that is so powerful. It's the equivalent of about 340 Raspberry Pis all running in parallel. And that thing is small. It's about maybe 2 centimeters, maybe less than an inch by an inch.
Wow.
All right. How do we work this radio? How do we play with it? Well, I already showed you some of the answer. We have clients. The client is the part that you and I use, as I jokingly say, the protein unit. That's you and I use to work with the radio. And so there's Smart SDR. These are the name of the programs that runs on Windows. There's the Maestro I already showed you. I showed you the complete radio. That could be something called a 6400 or a 6600. Both of those ending in M as in Mike. There are applications that run on iPhones. There's applications that run on Macs. There's actually 2 different by 2 different authors. And I was just going to turn on my radio, but I remember I turned everything off at the remote because we actually have lightning here in the winter today. It's one of those Texas lows I was bugging the guys at the office about that they sent me. So we grew up dealing with something called a VFO. There was VFO-A and VFO-B. Well, some of our radios have VFO-A, VFO-B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. It's sort of how much money do you have or which model do you buy? But at minimum, every radio has 2. We just call them slices because they're a slice of the HF radio spectrum. And what you can do in this radio is 2 users, we call that multiplex, can actually use the same radio at the same time and be listening at different slices anywhere in that HF radio spectrum. It's pretty cool. So here's a look at the Smart SDR client. This one runs on Windows. And what we have are 2 slices open, or actually we have 2 pan adapters. We have a pan adapter here, which is on 20 meters, and we have a pan adapter on the bottom, which is on 40 meters. The green stuff is signals, and the waterfall is a history of radio signals in a vertical pattern with the oldest one at the bottom. Oh, you'll see more of this. And we actually, in this case, have a DX cluster sending the cluster spots right to the waterfall, so I know who's that loud signal, or I can just look at my waterfall and see if there's somebody I want to talk to, or maybe a new country I need. If you're an HF person, you've heard we sort of generalize radios into two types, contest grade or non-contest grade. So all 6000 series models, and it also includes the two older ones, the 6300 and the 6500, are contrast grade radios. They all have the ability to use remotely, whether that's right here at my desk, in another room, outside, maybe on a picnic table, or half a world away. You can have multiple clients connect to different clients at the same time. They all do controlled envelope single sideband. I haven't mentioned that, but I got a slide coming up about that. All but one of them have bandpass filters, which makes them incredibly great radios for field day. And all of them can control external hardware like amplifiers or filter boards or whatever you want. Or even you want a big light to flash on that says on the air just by plugging a dongle in the back of the radio. And it's not an expensive dongle. Sorry, just a second. It looks like we have a couple of people in the waiting room.
Sorry, I'm too busy watching your.
Yeah, that's okay.
There we go. Thank you.
So this picture here, we have, oops, I'm using a Magic Mouse. I love my Mac until I don't. I'm actually a Windows person, but I'm on the Mac today. This is a typical setup. You would have, you would hook it at home. We would just plug the radio into a network switch, and we can then access it through a PC or a laptop over Wi-Fi. And if we needed the radio to be available on the internet for remote, it's available. But the internet's not required for the radio to function. Pretty straightforward. And if you ever wanted to look at the back of the Maestro, this is the part you would sit on your desk. But if you look at the back, and this is why I'm showing details of the back, this is where we get to hook up all the stuff. Your headphones, your CW key, a microphone, a foot switch, line in and line out, maybe another microphone. And I don't have one with me to show you, but that display is a big display. It's an 8-inch display and easy to read, incredibly good resolution. It's bright. This thing runs on LAN cable or Wi-Fi or a battery, so you can take it with you. It's got a speaker built in, but you can also hook up a powered speaker. Okay, this may take a minute. Controlled envelope single sideband is a algorithm. That means it's a program that runs in the RF section, not the audio section, but the radio section, or the actual of the radio. And the short story, the too long didn't read part, is that it produces, it allows your sideband envelope to actually develop up to just shy of 3 dB more talk power. And you can read about it, but what this prevents from happening is overdriving the RF section. And in any superhet radio, when you overdrive that RF section, the radio will actually shut down the transmitter RF output. This is why often you may try to look at a watt meter that's even a bad peak reading one. Doesn't seem to show 100 watts if you're trying to drive it to 100 watts. So what do? We turn the compressor on. And while the watt meter's happier, it actually makes you sound worse. In the picture we have here, a typical RF signal being transmitted on a scope is the blue signal. And when we turn this compressor on, that's built into this radio, the K4 has it by Elecraft, and the Anon have it. Flex Radio had it first. We actually drive the radio RF power out to almost 99.999% power out. It's really good. And I will send this presentation to you guys on Monday. There is a video here at the bottom you can go watch. It's the author, Dave Hirschberger, describing exactly how it works. Really cool. I've got 3 videos. This one is the power of the waterfall and how, and I probably need to do this a little better. Now there's some DXpeditions out there, so I should be able to do a couple of better ones coming up. But anyway, we have, we're running split. Our transmitter is over here. We're receiving here because that's up. This is a Quebec 7 Delta X-ray calling CQ, and these are people calling him. So there's a bit of dialogue that comes with this. If I think I turned it on, you should be able to hear it. Here we go.
We have some DX here on 15 meters, and this is 8 Quebec 7 Delta X-ray. I have my packet cluster spot there. We can see him calling, and we can see people answering now. The pile-up's thinned out a bit, but you could see it'd be easier for him to work because there's not many people calling him back. Now, granted, he's half a world away, and sometimes I can't hear everybody calling him, but I got him on the second call sheerly by watching him call and waiting for and seeing where people are answering him. So let's have a listen. And if we watch, we can see this guy's calling too often because he's doubling with him. Eventually, he may hear him if a Quebec 7 Delta X-rays receiver is here, which is up about 1500 hertz. Now we don't see the next guy replying, which is unfortunate, but you get the idea. If they reply, you'll see them. As an example, if someone replied, if this was the guy he was working, we could just double click our mouse and move over there and have a listen. And we could set this up in stereo so that we'd have the DXpedition on the left and maybe the masses on the right. So let's go back, see if he actually gets this guy. There you go. And if I was me, I would call right here because I know that's where his receiver is. That's the power of working a DXpedition using a waterfall.
I can't tell you how powerful this is. We, Andy, VA3CW, and Dave WO2X, and I, we work all day long, but there's, it's sort of a cool job because you go, well, I'm going to go try to work this DXpedition. And there's a number of them on right now. And all week it's been, I need this guy in 15. I'm going to go get him. And he's got a pile up going. Dave comes back. We use Slack, comes back about 90 seconds later. Yeah, got him on the second call. And he's been doing that all week just because you can easily see where the answering people are. So you know where the DXpedition's receiver is, where he was hopefully listening. And I hope that makes sense. But once you do it twice, you go, wow, it's pretty cool. Now this is going to play twice. So just a second. Come on.
We have some DX.
There we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about SO2R, which is a contesting tool. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it means single operator to radio. It's what us contesters do when we're bored. And it allows, but it usually means you need 2 radios, 2 amplifiers, 2 tuners, multiple antennas, bandpass filters, station controllers, antenna switches, and spend a lot of money, buy a lot of cables, and ultimately you end up with an amazing diagram that looks like this. And this is Jan's Sierra Echo 3 X-rays SO2R station, and this is pretty cool. But he's got 2 HF radios, he's got BAM switches, he's got everything, antenna switches over here, tuners, rotors, and it probably took him 2 days just to draw this diagram. Great station, but ultimately he replaced it with a flex radio solution, and it looks like this. And you notice there's a lot of things missing. He's a lot of cables that you don't need anymore. We have a radio. This could actually be 1 radio. It could actually be 2 radios connected to the Flex Power Genius amplifier. Oops. And then he's got the Tuner Genius, which is the paired tuner that goes with it, to an antenna switch. A 2x8 antenna switch will control up to 8 antennas. Now, the advantage of this tuner and this amplifier is you can actually be receiving on it while you're talking on it, because it's got a in and out side. Incredibly easy to use, don't have to worry about it. But there's this word that I could do a whole hour talk just on an SO2R setup. And by the way, the blue cables are just the LAN cables that tie it all together. No more RS-232, etc. And the more wires you get rid of, your station gets quieter, because all these wires we tend to have hooked up into our radios actually bring noisy RF into the radio as well. And if you can't hear them, you can't work them. Although I'm sure there's a whole lot of people that tried to work 3 Yankee Zero Juliet that were on FD8 that never heard them at all, just hoping they'd get in the logbook. Okay, another video. This is an 80-meter net near my house a couple of years ago. remember I said earlier that the green are signals, and you can see that, wow, what's this big green thing? Well, I'm turning a special noise blanker on and off, and you can hear the difference it makes. You cannot hear the signal through here. And this is from a power line bad insulator. Let's have a listen.
WB2KAO here. Good morning, Barry.
Now, WB2KAO, we can barely hear. Let me turn the blanker back on.
Yeah, real good, Barry. Got off the bike, and I thought, well, let me check in with you here for a minute before I go up and get in the shower. We got quite a bit of
Hear the difference? I'm trying not to get these to play twice, but the YouTube video ones want to play twice, so bear with me. All right. If you're a digital mode operator, if you're on HF and running digital, you probably own some sort of sound card interface, or you have a newer radio that has it built in on USB. We do the same thing, but we do it over the network. But you don't need a signal link or a rig expert or something like that. You know what? More wires that bring noise into the radio are more RFI issues. This is all built into the network. You run 2 little helper programs on your computer, and it allows all the current programs used today, from HRD, DM780, DX Commander, FL Digi, N1MM, N3FJB. All these programs connect directly to the radio. They don't need to be flex ready. Now they could be, but
range of motion much more than the related joint in your leg, which is your hip. So the shoulder and arm parts of the exoskeleton don't look like the lower ones. So
could somebody mute him, please?
2 muscles pull, the tendons pull,
And maybe
it
I
gets
can.
the range of motion that is like.
Thank you. And digital audio exchange, it replaces all the sound cards. It just makes it easy to do. And we assign, we call them channels, sound channels, to each receiver slice, but it just makes it incredibly easy to set up. Okay. One more video. This is a example of lightning. Now, I don't know how much lightning you guys get in the West Coast, but in the summertime, it's pretty bad here. In fact, we have lightning tonight. And you can see each one of these horizontal lines is a lightning strike. And if you've lived through lightning before and worked on it like low band 80, 40, 160, and often a comment is, I didn't hear you, the lightning strike or the static crash took you out. Because Flex Radio says something called Fast Attack AGC, it actually essentially does an incredibly good job of muting this lightning in about 10 milliseconds. You still hear it, this little click, but you can now carry on a QSO. Now, some of the QSOs I record are sometimes a little colorful. This is the same net, and they're talking about an accident on a farm that wasn't very good, but I just want you to hear the quality of the conversation, maybe not the topic.
See it, I'm about here. In fact, I'm right there. That little green dot is my lightning map receiver. And here's the storm right over Lake Huron coming into Georgian Bay. And you can see a bit of stuff going on here. So we'll get rid of that. So let's turn on the audio, and I want you to just listen to what we're hearing here. Okay. My AGCT for 80 meters, let's see, is way too high. Let me turn off my audio. Or we'll turn this down. If I adjust my AGCT just down, you'll notice it gets really quiet. But you go, I'm not going to be able to hear anything. Let me turn this. No, I'm going to turn this level up to a normal level. And we hear that click. And that's the Fast Attacks Dual AGC. Click on, click off. I'm at medium, by the way, not at fast, not at slow. So how does that translate if you want to listen to a couple of guys? There's a net here on 3755.
1718. Anyway, the one went into the silo, died from the gas. The other one went into, seen his brother floundering there, went in and he died too.
So you'll notice we can hear, that's my buddy Chad, speaking, just rag chewing about whatever, and plain as day, sort of like the winter on a quiet day. Yeah, it's not perfect, but man, it's easy to listen to.
Similar story. Silos are nothing to mess with. Matter of fact, a lot of people put signs on the doors, especially up high, not to get in there. And that's a shame. Thanks for sharing that with everyone. It's VE2HOG, and he's a farmer, so he knows what's going on. This is the OnTARS net. Anybody like to check in before I have to check?
So that's a huge difference in listening. You know, the S meter is not being pounded over to the right corner and the static crashes. And you heard me mention automatic gain control threshold. It's an alignment thing. It's probably one of the most powerful tools on the radio. There is no RF gain like we used to use on superhet radios. We just set the automatic gain control. Takes all of a quarter second the third time you use it, and powerful tool. Works incredibly well.
See it.
Okay, last video. If you've ever worked a satellite, this is a great little signal, little recording of what a satellite sounds like. This is, it was CAS, it's actually not 5A, I just edited that today and still got it wrong. But anyway, it's one of the AMSAT satellites. This green signal is coming down on VHF. It's the, they call it the bat wings. It's the telemetry for the satellite. We see a CW signal here, and we see some QSOs going on over to the right here. The cool thing too here is we have some software controlling the radio. And if you watch really closely, you can see the downlink frequency change and the uplink frequency change if I was having a QSO. But essentially what you're not hearing is the Doppler that normally happens. To keep the QSO in tune, the software does it automatically. There we go.
I guess it's something you need to do, but boy, you hate to do it. Oh, there goes that new radio, Peter. Probably about 5, 6 of them, Jeff, over. Roger that. And I was just thinking, I'm doing a lot of part-time work, and I'm thinking maybe I could afford that 7300, but with the roof coming, no, not this year. Okay. I'm surprised you don't have one already. I've got an old IC7410 that I really like, and I've got a 991A here, and I like it too for portable.
And that's just, I do a lot of satellite work. The nice thing is we don't have to wait for sunspots to do satellite work. But lately, of course, the bands have been in amazing shape with the solar flux going as high as 300. So it's just another part of the hobby. Alrighty. We talked briefly about remote operation, but we can truly do remote, and you don't need to be a computer guru to do remote. You don't need to understand VPNs. You don't need to know about router port forwards or Dyn DNS. SmartLink, which is built into the radio, it's a secure connection to your radio. It's a peer-to-peer connection, which makes it as fast as possible. And it's about as complicated to set up as logging into an email account. And it is incredibly mainstream today. COVID drove it that way. We were set up to it, and it's free. It's included with the radio, no extra charge. I had mentioned multiflex once or twice. This is the ability for 2 clients to use the same radio at the same time, and they can be connecting to the radio from any way or any direction, whether it's in the same house or in a different country. Really great teaching tool, by the way. Great for Elmering if you've got I don't know if you do any programs or not, but the ability to share. By the way, one thing I didn't mention about the remote operating is we have so many people now that grab an iPad, go visit a shut-in, and allow them to get on the air when they haven't been able to get on the air since they've long since left their ham shack, their house, or whatever, if they're in assisted living, and gets them on the air. Even get a nice looking headset like this one. Away you go. This Radio Sport headset hooks right up to my iPad. And the other thing I'm seeing happening with things like multiflex and remote is 3 or 4 hams who have maybe gotten together because they've all moved into HOAs or somewhere, but they still have a buddy that has a farm or something with some internet, and they build a station there and they all just share it. So only one guy has to climb towers or put antennas up or down. This is just a quick overview of the key parts of the radio. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but the key thing, and I didn't talk about this at all, some radios have one of these SCUs or spectral capture units, and some have two. If the radio has one, you can use one antenna at a time. And if the radio has two, you can use two antennas at a time, and it behaves like two radios. So you could be using an 8040 trap dipole and receiving on it and transmitting at it on the same time that you might be using your tri-band antenna. No other radio does it that simply. I talked about the number of slices. Some have 2, some have 4, some have 8. Same thing for 1 or 2 transmitter ports and bandpass filters. And if you ever want to know more about this, just give us a call. We'll be happy to spend a lot more time explaining it. I quickly showed you a picture of the amplifier a while ago, and I'm going to talk about 2 things. It's a full legal limit amplifier, but there's one thing in here you've probably never heard of before. There's a dummy load. There's something we call a harmonic dummy load. And what that does is it gives us a much cleaner signal. Well, how does it do that? Well, we know when you amplify something, you get, say if you amplified 14 megs, you're going to have a 28 meg second harmonic plus a third harmonic, fourth harmonic, and above. Well, they don't make it out the antenna. They're usually reflected by the low pass filter prior to the antenna. Well, what do you do with that energy? Well, generally it bounces away around in the amplifier and eventually dissipates itself as heat. And it bounces itself all the way back to the power amplifier. It can actually give you not the cleanest signal. In the 403A Power Genius amplifier, that RF is caught by a high pass filter and sent into a dummy load, and where it's just turned into heat and nice and cleanly dissipated. Now, you know what? That's a 400 watt dummy load, and it gets hot. So it does really good job, that whole solution. As well, we have something called MEFA, maximum efficiency algorithm, and essentially it changes the bias on the radio, allowing us to become more efficient for some constant carrier modes. And it easily does 2000 watts out, although 1500 in the US. Great, amazing amplifier. And it has the ability to do single operator 2 radio right from the beginning. That may not be important to you, but if you're using a Flex 6600 with 2 antennas, you could be transmitting and receiving at the same time. Over the last year, we've come up with a tuner genius, which pairs with the amplifier. Legal limit. Both the amplifier and the radio, by the way, can be integrated with other OEM radios, Icom, Kenwood, Yaesu, Elecraft, etc. This is an incredibly fast tuning amplifier. It can be used locally or in a local host or in a remote setting. It's got a whole whack of memories in it, and it's incredibly quick at shutting down things too if you have high SWRs. It's good for about 10 to 1, which is typical for something of this size at this power. And we can't keep these and the amplifier in stock, actually. So almost done here. The Flex, the SDR, I'm not going to use that term anymore. It's just a new technology of HF radio. It does everything any other HF radio you have today does. You can be rag chewing, contesting, you can build an SO2R station. You can use any digital mode, you can use it remotely, do satellites or weak signal work with transverters. You can write your own user interface if that happens to be you, and they aren't as expensive as you think. The 6300, which came out about 2013, are available used for about 1300 US. And you can put the latest software on it and it works just as good as one of the brand new ones if you wanted to get going in new technology. Our Flex 6400 brand new starts about, I think it's $2240. I'm not in sales anymore. I've forgotten all the prices. Just about $2,300. And you can spend, and we have much greater models depending on how many feature functionality. Again, type of conversation we'd rather have with you over the phone. We truly get brick wall filtering. We can have multiple main receivers. We don't have a main receiver and a sub receiver. We have multiple main receivers. I showed you the wide noise blanker. We talked about the automatic gain control, controlled envelope, single sideband, more power. That makes your 100 watts sound like 200 watts, or your 1500 watts sound like 3000 watts. Great field day radio. We also, I'll talk about this in the next 2-second slide. All your audio stuff for digital modes not required. No cables, no nothing built in. You can add on programs if you're a programmer where you want to interface stuff with Node-RED, ready to go. And we have a great Facebook group. We have over 5,000 people on Facebook. We have an incredible help desk that's staffed by Flex employees. These are the best people in the world at solving problems that people may have, whether it's interface problems or physical problem with the radio. We have a great community, same thing for user support. If you're trying to do something like get some funky program working with it, a whole pile of YouTube videos. You can contact us directly. You see the numbers below. Even though that goes to sales, you're getting ham operators. And they're active ham operators. They'll talk ham radio with you. None of our calls are ever short because people want to talk about ham radio. So that's why people yell at us when you didn't answer the phone. Well, we didn't answer the phone because we're talking to another ham operator. We take trade-ins, and radios come with a 2-year warranty. And if you don't like the radio for whatever reason, you got 30 days, we'll give you your money back, which is quite nice. I don't know anybody else that does that. And if you need to get hold of me, you can find me at michael@flexradio.com or any of one of these sales addresses. And certainly you saw the numbers. I said I'd share this whole presentation with you. And I'm now to the point where we have any questions. And I noticed there's 16 things in the chat window.
Yeah. So Mike, this is Rob, KC6TYD. And if you want to unshare your screen so we can get them back on here, perfect. And let me go back over here to speaker mode, unpin you. Sure that's working. Okay, so what we'll do here is I already have a few people that had a lot of questions. So just to get them out of the way so we don't have double ups. Yep. Hot mic where?
Louder than heck. Don't
Oh,
talk
okay.
so loud.
No problem. Sorry.
Well, you're good into Zoom, so it must be the outbound
I'm
somewhere else.
blasting everybody out here, so I'll pull away from my mouth. Let's go over to W6DH. Dave, he had a whole bunch of questions. So Dave, you're up.
Oh, wow. Thanks. Okay, sure. Well, I'm a retired software professional done user interface work. So some of the things you'll see, it looks like the software is open source, which means I can get in and play. And I'm wondering about if I introduce bugs, how well are the finals protected from that?
You won't break the finals. You can't command the radio
Okay.
to do anything it's not designed to do by the API. So we haven't given you, full keys to the kingdom, but we've given you everything to receive signals, decode signals, change any user setting, and put the radio into transmit. Believe
Great,
me, if you were going to blow the finals, someone would have done it by now. It hasn't happened.
Yeah. I know hams are good at blowing finals. So the GUI, the graphical user interface for the client program seemed like busy, and it might be hard to quickly move the mouse and find the control. I was wondering, how was it designed? Did someone apply anything like Fitts Law, any of the empirical stuff known for
Nope.
designing easy to use user interfaces?
The
Okay.
interface was designed back about 2013. It's probably something that should happen. But, we have over 11,000 radios in the field. And
Right.
we do get a little grumbling about it. It should, done better. And
But
that
it could
doesn't
be
prevent
anything,
anybody.
and you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I meant that someone could vastly improve it, and all hardware still works. So that's really cool.
You could write your own client, and that's
Yeah.
both the Mac clients were written by people who are not Flex employees. You could write a Chromebook client if you wanted, or an Android or a Linux client. That's usually the next question, and those aren't we actually welcome somebody to come and write them because we're not going to do it. We don't have time, to be blunt, but we'd happily help somebody if they wanted to
Sure.
do that.
Sure. So I hope I got permission to go direct and ask all my questions. The Magic Trackpad does haptic feedback, which means it can click and vibrate and stuff under your hands. But I assume your interface doesn't take advantage of that on the appropriate hardware.
No, no. I was hoping somebody
Okay.
would write a client for the Oculus Rift.
That would be very cool. That would be very cool. You mentioned the Fast Attack AGC and also the controlled envelope sideband, I think it was. How do those compare to what's commercially available on other rigs? You know, top of the line ICOM or one of that.
So I haven't used I haven't used a 7610, although I have a 7300, which is probably one of the most popular HF radios. Don't know. I would actually have to go buy radios and test it. We don't buy everybody else's radio. We're pretty happy with their design. I've you know, radios like the FTDX10 type of thing, or the FT101. What do they call the new one? Because I had a ZD forever ago. I'd like to think we're better. None of the ICOM, Yaesu, Kenwoods have controlled envelope single-sided sideband built in, although Dave, I think it's W9GR, who wrote it, offered it free to be included. Only Elecraft took them up on that. Besides us.
The decibel advantage you gave, was that compared to conventional speech processing on, you know, a regular
Yes.
rig? Or is that compared? Oh, that was.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, that was a key question.
And conventional, let me add more on that. Conventional speech processing day is terrible. And if you ever try to work a DXpedition with the compressor on and you never work them, try with the compressor off. You really need to hear yourself, because generally it gives you more RF out. It looks great. You sound like crap.
Cool. Very cool. And also you had an incredible demo of the thing tracking the satellite frequency. And I was wondering if I'm just poking around looking for a phone contact on sideband. Is the thing smart enough to just go to the exact right carrier frequency for my received single sideband?
No.
Seems like it could be.
It could if you had some way to carrier match, but no, it's not worth spending the effort on.
Okay.
It's a good idea, though.
And yeah, thank you. Last question. Given that, you know, I can work this from any iOS device, have you ever awoken in the middle of the night, can't get back to sleep, and made some FT8 contacts from bed?
Not me, but I know many who do that. You know, they're, and in all seriousness, I've learned that so many people have had houses where they've had two HF radios because they're downstairs or they're in the kitchen a lot, and they like to be on HF, and they ran feed lines everywhere, and now they just carry an iPad around.
Sure, sure. Hey, Mike, thanks. You've been very patient with all my questions.
No,
I
no
really
problem at all.
enjoyed the talk. And I really love the idea of the product too.
Yeah.
Being able to get in my hands
Dave,
on the software.
Dave, you'll love this, and if you want to tinker at that level, I think you'll be impressed about what you can do. In the presentation, there's a video by Anna, one of our chief developers, about how you get started communicating with the radio, and it's as simple as a telnet session to the radio.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Okay, well, thanks. And back to Rob Net Control, W60H.
All right. Thanks there, Dave. Good questions. Let me take it over to Ben, KN6UBF. You had some questions?
I had two, but you already answered one of them, so we'll skip that one. So you mentioned there's an FPGA involved in the downstream of the sampling. I'm just wondering, what is that actually doing? Is it like an ADC? It's doing everything.
Well, we come through an ADC.
Right.
And I'm also a private pilot, by the way.
Oh, cool.
And that's just
fun.
new to me. So
yeah,
in the last 5 years. So we come out of the antenna, we go through the ADC, and then we into the FPGA to do all the number crunching. And one of them, this is sort of a good and bad story. We get hit on because we don't have some of the features we should, but we also have a policy that if you write a feature, it needs to run in the radio, not on the client. So that continues to then support the fact that our clients are thin clients, like an iPhone and iPad, and we don't want to load them up.
So is there no other processor in the radio itself, or is everything important just happening in RTL
That's
and the FPGA?
There's a couple of processors, but that's the high level story. So we come
Got
from the FPGA, and we have to go to another processor, and that the processes, generalistically, the audio is sent out on a network stream, on a UDP audio stream, and the pan adapter waterfall is nothing more than a movie.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, Ted had a question, W6SY, and then Andy had another question regarding your satellite. After that, I'll take some questions here at Coverly. If anybody on Zoom has additional questions, go down to that reaction tab and use a little wave your hand gesture, and I'll find you in a little bit. So let's go over to Ted, W6SY.
Hey, this is Ted, SO2R, and my question is only 2 ? Because it does seem, because my previous career was investment banking, and sometimes I'd have 4 or 5 telephones sort of jammed against my head, and it, especially with automatic keyers and computer controlled reply for CW, I could imagine there would be moments when you could actually manage 4 or 5 contacts at once. I mean, I suppose we're just off into like super theoretical here, but there's nothing magic about 2. The only reason 2 is the number is that's the number of ears that I have on my head. Is that, am I properly understanding the technology that is this radio can, or this receiver can listen to, n less than however, like a huge number of things at once, and then you just kind of hit the button to reply to one, move to the next one, move to the next one.
The RTTY guys are a good example. Chris Tate often runs SO4R in RTTY on a 6600. So yes, there's nothing limiting you to do that other than your ability to process, because every receiver is a main receiver. Now, since you can only transmit once, you just decide that this next receiver is where I'm transmitting, and in a millisecond, the transmitter is focusing in that direction. So yeah, you could do SO4R or SO8R,
now,
depending on the radio.
One other thing that I've imagined is I could have a delayed audio recorder so that I can hit the button, turn my attention elsewhere, and just fake it and say again to this other guy. Not that I missed you because the reception was bad. It was like I wasn't paying attention. Much like you might imagine a, dare I say, a telephone entertainment conversationalist entertaining several clients at once. If anybody understands where I'm going with that.
Oh, Ted.
There's this is the advantage of this radio platform, is if you really want to exploit all the available resources, you can. There's not a whole lot of limitation other than 2 spectral capture units in your case. So you would have to use leverage that, but it's all doable. We could actually, if you probably had given enough horsepower, you could record the entire HF spectrum contest.
Well, because I remember 2 years ago at Field Day, I was involved in what I would call a reverse pileup, which was I heard several stations calling CQ at the same time, and usually in a pileup, one guy's calling CQ and a bunch of people are trying to get his attention, whereas I heard several, and I toss out the replying call sign, and several people would reply all at once, which was just the weirdest experience on the radio. Finally, I say, no, you, I'm talking to you. And I reply and say, now this other guy, and now this other guy. So it sounds like there are, I mean, especially with the various AI things coming up, contesting is going to change a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We can do more gamification of it too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, let's see if there's anybody here in the room. Oh, Joe's here. And then there was Henry. So Mike's coming your way.
Yeah, you gonna make one of these cards? I mean, one of these radios on a card? Because I remember back in the day, I had a 100-watt radio that went on an ISA card. And now that we've been standardized with the PCI Express, and I think even the Luddites, they got at least X4. So if they built one on a card at PCI Express X4, everybody'd be able to plug them in. And those things computers will handle 100 watts more power now. I got a 95-watt processor, 1100-watt power supply, because that's what we used to need in them towers.
There's no reason why we could, but I doubt we would. Not I doubt. I know we would never do it. And the reason being is one of supportability. Most of today's operators, we are really heading down. I'm going to finger quote this as sadly more into the appliance operator who just wants to get on the air and make contacts. And while there are people that, the corner cases, the other 10% on either side are would happily do this. It's just not, it wouldn't be financially possible to design, build, support, fund, and post-sale support it and sell it at a price everybody would like. So it comes down to economics. So the answer is probably no. Not that it wouldn't work, just doesn't make sense. We have a CFO that's not a ham. It's if you want to do something new, I get how many are you going to sell? What can I sell it for? What's it going to cost to make, and how much money I'm going to make, so that I can pay you people to do all this. Sort of reality,
That'd be
right?
a good thing.
Yeah, our guys like to get paid, and they have kids to put through college. So
Yeah.
All right, Dave.
Mike, thanks for the help. I've got a couple of quick questions. Okay, first one is about current rigs. You've got the AGC-T or threshold there. So that is, so is there a default when you turn it off or on, or
it's just automatic?
stay
It's
where it was
hard-coded.
last set?
Yeah. Well, there's a regular AGC, but this is also built in on top of everything else that takes priority. So you can have, like in a typical HF rig, slow, medium, fast, or you can turn it all the way off if you want.
Okay, thanks. And then the next couple of questions. Okay, on your filtering. Okay, you get extensive filtering techniques and stuff. Can you save any setups on your filtering to go back?
Yep.
Excuse me. Go back to those, and
Yeah.
or okay. Let's put that aside for a moment. And also on the radios, can you do a scanning function with them, or so you can have one scanning while one is on a particular band or an alternate band, that kind of thing?
Well, let me talk about the filtering and stuff. Yes, there's ways you can save. We call them profiles, where you can sort of save the state of the band you're on. So you might have a profile for sideband, a global profile for CW, one for digital modes and stuff, and you just reload it, and the radio just restores itself to where it was, as in a snapshot. Profiles is a big, long discussion because it controls so many things. Scanning, no, not really. I believe there's an add-on tool called FRStack that will simulate a scanning function, but it's you won't really be happy with the result.
Okay, next one is remoting. So can you usually remote these, or you need a second rig, or and you mentioned the iPad or whatever to control?
No, it's just remoting is just an extension of normal operating. So it's really as simple as it sounds. If you can get the radio on a LAN that gets I'll be a little bit technical, an outside WAN address, then you can connect to it from pretty much anywhere. The only failing point today is that unless you buy a commercial license from Starlink, it will not function.
Okay, one or two more. That quickly is there's no reference. I looked on your webpage, at least I thought I looked at all of it, but there's nothing about previous designs of the Flex all the way back. I can remember the 5000 and so on. I was wondering, do I look at alternate websites for any previous rigs and so on? And also, do you guys service those?
So on the older models, we don't service the 1500, 3000, 5000 anymore. The Troy, Toby at Troy Radio in Troy, I guess it's in Troy, Texas, services those radios. Yeah, we don't have any history or legacy, much legacy stuff posted, although we are just celebrating 20 years of innovation coming up this year. And currently service the 6000 series radios in Austin, Texas.
Okay, one more, and that is, so your email, michael@flexradio.com, is that correct?
Yep.
Great, thanks a lot for the great job.
673.
All right, let's get Henry over here. There we go.
I'll use this one. Hey, this is Henry W6REK. I was visiting the shack at Georgia Tech where the club is, and they had the Flex radio, and I was watching the guys using it, and it looked a little intimidating, but they all took off at one point to go get pizza and left me in the shack, and I found I had no problem at all figuring it out, changing things and making contacts. So it was a great radio experience, and congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, David, I see you've got a question. We'll go back to W6DH.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Mike, I thought of a few more questions. One of them is the software on the radio itself. How open is that? I realize I can do anything with a client. Can I put my own software in the radio? Can I reprogram the FPGA if it's a field programmable gate array?
No, not at all. We have that pretty locked down. We're worried about theft of intellectual property.
Sure, makes perfect sense. So none of the software on the radio itself is customizable. Is that correct?
No. Even I can't see it.
Okay, that's fine. That's cool. And then kind of a silly question. Anyone ever hooked up ChatGPT to this thing, since it's all, client on a computer?
No idea. But let me know how you make out.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's see. Oh yeah, one more question that I can think of so far. So it'd be a lot of fun to play with this, and since it works fully remote, there could be like a website somewhere, kind of a pay-to-play thing, where, for whatever, an hour, I could try it out, play with it, have the experience. Is there anything like that?
Actually, there is. You can look up remote ham radio.
Cool. Hey,
They'll
thanks
give
a lot
you
again, Mike.
big gun HF stations on the East Coast.
Oh, neat. Thanks.
Okay, I forgot.
Andy had a question there too about satellite.
Yeah, Andy did. I was just coming back to him. I forgot all about that. Go ahead, Andy. Don't forget to unmute your mic. There we go.
Oh, okay. My camera doesn't work, so I have to look into that later.
That's okay.
I wrote the chat in the chat. So how did you achieve satellite operation? Did you have to plug in transverters, one for UHF, one for VHF? And does that work only with custom units that people buy from Flex Radio, or can you adapt to other transverters?
You can adapt. I used 2 Q5 signals transverters, and they're 25 watt units, not incredibly expensive. They were really sort of plug and play. So it's a very small alignment. Other people make transverters like Kuhn that would probably work. I have a 6600, so I have 2 spectral capture units. So remember, it behaves like 2 radios, and VHF hooked up to one and UHF hooked up to another. And it takes these transmitters are designed to operate with 10 dBm of RF power for transmit and work amazingly well. And they can be GPS locked or 10 megahertz synchronized and locked. So that's what I was using, 2 of them.
Okay, that's very interesting. Were you educated in Toronto? I was at U of T.
No, I was actually grew up in North Bay.
Oh,
So
okay.
I took avionics school in
Okay.
North Bay back about 1979.
Okay. Very interesting. The entire system is really quite fascinating. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else on Zoom that has a question?
Oh,
Nope. How about here in Coverly? Anybody else?
yes.
Oh,
I have a question. Is what you're doing with the speech in your transmitter compandering? Is that what you're doing?
No, it's not. It's actually a math algorithm to make sure that we drive the audio envelope to fit the, I'm the wrong person to describe this, but drive the audio envelope to fit the RF envelope to 100% modulation. When you get a copy of the PDF, there's a video to watch from Dave, W9GR, who wrote it, and he explains exactly how that works.
Are you doing anything similar on the receive and for the audio?
No, no need. We do a lot on the receive, but we don't do anything to, we can't really identify, I don't know, I've sort of tap danced around this answer, but the short answer is no. And yeah, is there, you're sitting here thinking, is there a way to write an algorithm that could even increase the signal and reduce the noise to improve our signal noise ratio? I'm sure if it was doable, we would have done it. And it may be doable, but maybe it's not doable for prime time, which means it might work well 80% of the time, and that's not good enough.
oop, looks like we got a couple more coming up.
Hey, Mike, thanks very much. I just had a comment with regards to the receive side. You'd need power or processing power. I think there's algorithms by, his last name is Pratt. And it does require quite a bit of processing on the audio domain. So, but it's doable, but most radios you can probably pick, do a pretty good job of it. Nice presentation. Thank you for doing this and staying up so late for us.
Well, thank you.
Okay, I think that's about, oh, we do have another one. Stand by.
Thanks, Mike. Great presentation. I'm Mark AF6IM. I bought a used 6500 and an early version Maestro. The Maestro, when you turn it on, has the image rotated 90 degrees from where you want it. And I found online a process for getting it set up right, but it takes a while. Permanent fix for this?
Yeah, call us. We have an amazing help desk ticket. They see this occasionally. They probably have a fix to it. I don't know what it is, but it's not that I've heard that question that often, but it's probably solved. I don't know what version of the software you're at, but we're currently, if you're at version 2, we're probably at 2.8, and I think we have 2.9 coming out shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, WB6JOE, I got one more. Does this thing play well with stuff like Cam Radio Deluxe and other third-party software?
Yep, although I don't know why you'd want to put the Ham Radio Deluxe GUI on the front end of our radio, because it's a different world, but you can. People have done it. It's just if that's your preference, sure, no problem. You'll only be able to operate one slice at a time, though.
Any more questions on Zoom or in the room? All right, let's give Michael a big hand.